surface and for the troop transport ships to be deployed. George wanted to have this notion of these huge, enormous ships pushing through the trees, and that out in front of them would be all the poor creatures that were caught in their way.
If they're down here, sir.
We needed to create all these creatures inside the computer because we weren't able to, shoot any real animals, and George wanted them to be from this different planet. So we have a whole number of species that you're going to see in the Stampede sequence. There are the Philopocets, which are the big sort of moose-like characters. There's the Pico-Picos, which are the flying birds. There's the Nunas, which are the little fat turkeys running in the foreground there. There's a number of other ones, the Mots, the little dog-like creatures. When we actually shot this sequence at Leavesden in England, there were no trees. It was a swamp section that was probably 50 feet by 100 feet, and I had real concerns of how we were going to pull this off. Once we got into it, and Dennis and his team got involved, they heard that either Caltrans or one of the utility companies was going to be cutting down some huge trees, and they sent a crew over to shoot those big trees being knocked down, and they were able to combine those into the sequence to make it look really real.
That's one thing necessary. Oh, but it is! Just imagine why the guy.
It's our first introduction of Jar Jar in the show. And Jar Jar, of course, was all computer graphics in the show, and was quite a challenge to get it. We're lucky to have Almond Best, who's a terrific actor who was shot as a sort of as a reference, but a lot more than a reference. He established a lot of the character and everything of Jar Jar. And then we shot a take without him and let the animators and Rob go to work on giving him the Jar Jar personality and all.
But the most safest place would be Gonga City. It's where I grew up.
The main issue here is that the Jedi have to get to warn the Queen of the planet, but they have to trek through this swamp to get there. And in the process, they make friends with one of the secondary characters, Jar Jar. The real issue for them is how are they going to get, how they're going to get to their goal at this point. The plot is a little bit goal-oriented. Can they get to the Queen before the Drake iteration gets there? There's a bit of a time clock, and that's really what drives the plot along in this first third of the picture. Can they rescue her before she is wiped out and captured by the Trade Federation?
He says, blast us into oblivion. Ah. Lucy Point is well seen. This way. Hurry! How much fun? It's going in the water. I played Jar Jar Binks, who is from this place called Oto Gunga, which is on the planet of Naboo. It's this underwater city.
You're not there for warm welcomes.
I don't think either of us really knew what the character was supposed to be about. George was looking for the movement of the character, and we knew he was an amphibian, we knew he was a bit clumsy, but we didn't really develop a personality, or he didn't really tell me the personality of Jar Jar when we started. It kind of grew from when we started, and as we were reading the lines and as we were going over it, Jar Jar's personality just began to erupt, out of nowhere. I think the reason why I was chosen is because he dug the way I moved, and Jar Jar is very much a movement character. A lot of his actions and a lot of what he does and what he says comes from his movement. And the whole purpose for him being where he is, and the whole purpose for him being who he is as far as being the Jedi sidekick, comes from the fact that he's a big clumsy amphibian.
I like the idea of an underwater city and a race of amphibians, which is really the original concept that Star Trek came from, was to have this underwater world. We're moving the plot along as how they're going to get to the Queen, but at the same time we're establishing an entire new race and environment and people who come to play a pivotal role in the climax of the movie, based on this particular scene in which it's established that the Gungans basically have low self-esteem in relationship to the people on the other side of the planet who live on the town of Theed and the humans. So what we've got here are two different societies, one that thinks it's less than the other. Not that they were treated any less, but that is their mindset. It's a common issue of relationships between societies because the people who live above ground have a different kind of technology, and they can fly in outer space and they have more contact
should care about Apu. And speed is on the way.
Boss Nass is, of course, one of our cameo characters, and you can see here with his flesh and his clothing, he was a challenging character to do, but he's a lot of fun to animate. What we call carry animation or caricature animation is in the facial performance. It's a piece of software that we wrote here. I think it gives us the real subtlety of performance that you see in all the muscles in the face. Other challenge with Boss Nass, of course, is his clothing. He's wearing this big robe, and it had to look convincing in terms of when it was bending and how it was folding. Because in the world of Star Wars, you're able to compare digital clothing to real clothing on a frame-by-frame basis. So you as an audience are going to believe in it or not believe in it based on how well we're doing our job. Clothing doesn't necessarily mean just clothing. If you look at Jar Jar's ears, or Boss Nass's ears, his are actually tied behind him at this point. They're also flopping around and reacting to his body. You can see they can rub up against his shoulders or bounce against his back depending on how fast he's moving. Secondary animation will help you believe in that character and believe that it's a physical being.
Life belongs to me. You saw.
See all the ribbings around on the outside that are holding up, they're keeping the water out. That boss is right in front of one of those ribs. And anytime you get back and look at it, that's what you're seeing. You're seeing like a round object with a structure holding it together, and then a membrane on top of it. And the way we talked about it was that membrane is a translucent membrane that you can walk through. And you see at one point, you see them walking through the membrane, and it sort of squeegees them dry as they go through it. So if you go through it slowly, you can just get right through it. But something like water pressure keeps it out, so the water can't get in.
At the same time, I'm able to put a threat into this and create a situation where there's danger in terms of an action set piece.
A small part of it would be Miss Clumsy.
Banished because of
Here we're able to give a little bit of background on Jar Jar, why he gets banished, why he's an outcast.
Our big monsters, Opie, and that school of fish. School of fish really helps add the scale to that shot. It wasn't originally in the shot. I think Dennis asked for it to be put in there. I think it really helps us, because you don't really have a sense of how big the submarine is really until you see the fish compared to it, and then you see immediately, you get an idea. Of course, we think it's big until this guy shows up, Sando, who snaps him in half. But during the production, that character's head was actually redesigned because it wasn't giving us the kind of scale that we needed. The eye needed to be much smaller, and we moved it to the front of the head. And that big wide shot really gives you an idea of how massive that was.
When we were doing Jedi, there was a rumor that George had 9 films in his head, and he clearly just completed 3 of them. That was just a rumor. And then I got to hear that George was indeed going to make this prequels, and that he was coming to London and he wanted to see me. He explained to me, not in great detail as you can imagine, but the trajectory of the 3 movies and my character in relation to that. But he talked about 2 people. I didn't understand at that time that those 2 might be merged into one, because he wasn't going to tell anybody that. And he talked about this perfectly ordinary, rather charming politician who one day